Sir Chowdhury Abrar, welcome to RFI.
Thank you.
You are a Professor of International Relations at the University of Dhaka and coordinator of the Refugee and Migratory Movements Research Unit. There are over 1 million Rohingya refugees in your country today who have fled atrocities in Myanmar. Most of them are in camps located near the border. You attended a conference in Paris at the National Assembly with people from across the world to discuss the situation of Rohingya people in Myanmar and Bangladesh. Not the first gathering of its kind, aiming to brainstorm and find solutions. We're nearing a year now since the Rohingyas massively fled Rakhine State following attacks by Burmese assailants and Myanmar army. Why is it, Professor Chowdhury, proving to be so difficult to find a solution to the Rohingya crisis?
It's proving to be difficult because the country which has actually committed these atrocities is refusing to acknowledge that the people whom they have banished from their land is actually their people. They have been bona fide nationals of that country, and they've had all the citizenship rights 40 years ago, and with the rights that has been taken away from them, discriminatory policies were practiced, and eventually there have been spikes of violence making sure that these people's life there is made absolutely untenable. And it is under those conditions in 1978, again in 1991-92, at various times in 2000, we have seen people crossing the border. And the final push came, as we all know, on August last year, when 800,000 came. So it's quite amazing. In this 21st century, when there is a whole plethora of human rights instruments in place, states are members of the United Nations, have committed themselves to uphold Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Even despite all those commitments, here is a rogue country enjoying total impunity in banishing its people. So obviously this is a problem, and mainly because the Western countries, they have got their interests there. Also Russia, China, they have got their own interest, and that's why human rights have been pushed to the back burner.
Bangladesh is under a lot of pressure to deliver. But is the Rohingya crisis solely a Bangladeshi problem or a regional one?
It has never been a Bangladesh problem. It just happens Bangladesh is the country of first asylum. And this is the right thing to do, despite the fact that Bangladesh is a resource-poor country, one of the most densely populated countries in the world, and the places where Rohingyas are currently located, southeastern tip of the country, it's one of the most economically depressed areas of the land. Despite all that, the people of Bangladesh and the government of Bangladesh have embraced the Rohingya because they are fleeing persecution. And as fellow human beings, that is what is expected of Bangladesh. But certainly, that should not in no way give any impression to the international community. This is a Bangladesh problem. This problem is an international problem. In all likelihood, there will be secondary movements of Rohingyas to other countries of the world. And when you have a group of disenfranchised people, traumatized people who have endured discrimination for decades, and these people can easily be lured into things that may not necessarily be conducive for peace in the region and peace in the world. It is in that context the world powers should get their act together, not being self-centered, and think in the long run and try to arrive at a solution so that these people can return home in dignity to protected homeland.
Can you see Bangladesh allies in the region, and I'm thinking about India, stepping up?
India's role has been a massive disappointment in Bangladesh, and I think the goodwill that India had commanded in Bangladesh, there has been a massive erosion of that, because this is one of the major challenges that Bangladesh has faced in recent times, and it expected at the minimum that a country which has benefited immensely from Bangladesh, I'll be very blunt about it, because it addressed a lot of Indian security concerns in Northeast India. It addressed the issue of communication, road contacts, and a whole range of other issues that India actually was struggling a lot. And those are the things that Bangladesh handed over to India. So security considerations were addressed, economic trade considerations with Northeast were addressed by Bangladesh. But in return, minimum Bangladesh had expected that India at least would be a neutral player, but it did not turn out to be that way. Mr. Modi himself went at a time when the Burmese army was conducting genocide, atrocities That's the time he went and visited the country. So it was very upsetting, and India continued to pursue policies which are not conducive to put any kind of pressure on Myanmar. It's a diplomatic failure for Bangladesh to an extent.
Bangladesh's powerful neighbor China has heavily invested in Myanmar. I'm thinking about the port in Rakhine and the oil and gas pipeline. And China is not very much inclined to intervene in favor of the Rohingyas or support the case of Bangladesh.
That's true. And the moves that were made in the UN Security Council, China was one of the major players, that thwarted any kind of move to make Burma accountable on the Rohingya issue. There are massive interests that China has in Myanmar. Obviously, that is the most important factor in this regard. But having said that, today, if Rohingyas are the target, but it's not going to end there. Chins could be the next target. And already there are rumblings that the community in the border region of China, they are under pressure from the Burmese government as well. Bangladesh need to get its act together and convince China that as a major player in this region, it has to go beyond seeking its own self-interest. And if this monster is not tamed, there is every likelihood that it's going to move on. It's going to take on other ethnic groups.
The Rohingyas, understandably, do not want to go back to Myanmar without assurances of safety and protection. The refugee camps could well be there for much longer than was anticipated. In a region where 1 million refugees outnumber some 500,000 local Bangladeshi, tensions are inevitable, especially when the local population can see their quality of life being degraded.
Yes, I think the host community has done an amazing job in opening up their homes, hearths, toilets, and a whole range of things. I mean, state moved in much later. It is the host community which extended their arms to the fleeing refugees. But obviously, as you have rightly said, they are paying very dearly. Their wage have gone down. Prices of essentials have gone up sharply. For months, schools could not be open. Children were out of schools. And freedom of movement, because it is very difficult to make any distinction between a Bangladeshi and a Rohingya. The Rohingyas are not allowed to go beyond certain points. So a bona fide Bangladeshi resident has to, each time moving from one place to another, present his documentation to prove that he is a Bangladeshi, he or she is a Bangladeshi. And that certainly one doesn't want to do that, and all these things are taking toll. And in order to offset that, any program that are being undertaken should take into account the needs of the host community. The economic factors are very important, livelihood opportunities of local people, so that those are not disrupted. That needs to be taken care of. And it is a very difficult task. This is not something that Bangladesh can bear. International community should have a stake in that and support Bangladesh. And through detailed discussion with the community members, both Rohingya as well as Bangladeshis, their voice need to be taken on board.
We have heard a lot of commiserations from all parts of the world about the fate of the Rohingyas and how heroic Bangladesh is for opening its borders. But is there enough international support in terms of funds to meet the needs of the refugees?
Bangladesh has done a great job, and that's the reason why international community is praising Bangladesh. But that's not enough. What Bangladesh needs is international pressure be mounted on Myanmar so that their nationals are taken back. And the United Nations, if it can't get its act together, then bilateral sanctions should be thought of, and countries should do much more than what they are doing. That's one. The second issue, of course, is mobilizing funds. The food, clothes, shelter, those things are the immediate needs that they need. But eventually, there has to be investment in education, on skills development, on livelihood opportunities. And those are some of the things that Bangladesh government is still a bit hesitant to speak about and to plan things, because it may give wrong signal to the Burmese, saying that, okay, they are thinking, having long-term planning to keep these people back. So in that respect, as a host country, Bangladesh is in a catch-22 situation. On the one hand, it wants to maintain the pressure on Burma and want international community to exert pressure on Burma so that conditions are created for the return of these refugees. But on the other hand, it also needs to take on board that return is not immediate and therefore some form of mid to long-term planning needs to be done, which in its turn may send a wrong signal to the Myanmarese authorities. So those things need to be worked out with the international community so that things make progress in the right direction.
Professor Chowdhury Abrar, thank you, and thank you for being on RFI.
Thank you. Thank you for having me over.